As editor-in-chief of Package Design magazine, I speak with some of the most brilliant thought leaders in the design, branding, and marketing of consumer packaged goods. Through the generous support of our sponsors, we bring these experiences to you. This video series explores what inspires these thought leaders and their insights on the collaborative design process as a strategic business competence. I'm Linda Casey, and this is Package Design Matters.
One of the things is if you just design within your current parameters, you're not going to do anything really interesting. You're only going to go with what's already accepted. If you look at the laundry category, at the time, everything was a jug of detergent with a giant cap on it. But we had created this very innovative formula using green chemistry that took all of the water out of the formula. And we needed a completely new format to dispense that, so that people would actually use the right amount. It's an 8 times concentrated detergent, so we needed a new design, a new packaging design to deliver that amount. So it was kind of a challenge on both ends. Like, how do we use this new innovation in terms of the ingredients, but then how do we get the consumer to use it correctly? And it wasn't necessarily that the consumer would embrace it, but that it was the only way to kind of deliver that product.
Evolutionary versus revolutionary is quite a debated topic. The first is slow and monotonous, little change and often little impact. The second risks destroying what consumers love about your brand. Stop debating. Go discover what's best for your brand. Let that be your guide for change.
We go outside of the spirits industry quite a bit because I think, you know, there's a tendency to kind of see what the Joneses are doing, and everybody tends to do something similar. You'll see that a lot in, you know, in the whiskey realm. You'll see a lot of common tropes come into play, especially if one whiskey comes in, takes off, and then everybody has to make an Old West apothecary-looking bottle, and then that'll take off for a while. But what we
moonshine mason jar.
Yeah, moonshine mason jars too. That's taken off.
So true.
So what we try and do is, you know, we actually look a lot at a lot of luxury products like perfume and things like that. We'll look at gourmet foods as well, because you look at some of those places, you get a lot more innovation there because they make so much more product that they can afford to change molds a lot more frequently without much penalty to them.
Product Ventures team of professionally trained packaging and mechanical engineers ensure that conceptual designs are optimized and engineered for manufacturing. With our extensive knowledge of design for molding and high-speed manufacturing, we work closely with our client supply chain and manufacturing partners to make sure that design integrity is maintained as new projects are commercialized. Together, we create cost-effective commercialization strategies to assure the successful introduction of new packaging designs into the marketplace.
I think getting out of the house and not spending your time in front of the computer is important. When we were kids, we used to play in the street till the sun came down. But now kids are, you know, sat in front of computer screens too much, and you know, that's another thing. You need to get out and enjoy different things. So I try to stay active outside of the design world, But I like to look at other areas as well, what's going on in science, what's going on in medicine, what's going on in the art world, and try and bring that all together to help make me a better designer and help me a better manager as well.
At the start of a project where it's a blank piece of paper and the problem seems a pretty challenging one, how do we get inspired is, I think, a really useful question to get something from an idea or a concept all the way into manufacture. It is a team process, it's a very collaborative process. It's really about the collective, and that is the powerful piece. One person with one idea plus one person with another idea is potentially 3 and beyond really good ideas. We're delighted to have our name attached to such an incredible list of contributors.
Maker's Mark is a phenomenal packaging story. That was the Samuels family. They had a long-running whiskey recipe that was handed down from generation to generation, and when it got to one of the generations, he said, "I think it's kind of harsh. I mean, whiskey's got kind of a bite to it, and I want to take some of that bite out of it." So he worked on the recipe while his wife, who had never done anything from a creative direction or packaging design standpoint ever in her life, but had an affinity for cognac and collecting cognac bottles, came across a style of bottle that she liked and dipped it in wax, and a legend was born. And it's won more design awards than I've ever won, that Beth has ever won. And that was her first and only packaging product.
She did it in her kitchen.
So it's taking that time to just enjoy the simple things. So, you know, it is walking around London, it's going to the V&A museum to see what other artisans and craft peoples do. It's going to the markets and just seeing, you know, the different, you know, the fresh cheeses, the flowers. So we'll drive in, there's a market in France that we'll drive to sometimes on the weekend, and just seeing all of those handmade artisan type products. It just makes you stop and appreciate the small things and the scents and the textures and the tastes, and that sort of feeds my creative eye.
But it is a passion. I love antiquing. I love home design. I love color. Color is kind of where my world is at, and I view things, I think, differently than a lot of people when I look at things. Somebody might see it as a piece of junk, and it might not be something I want to buy, but there might be something about it that I like, the shine or the color or the way that the color may have aged through the years and what's happened to the patina and that sort of thing. So I think in all aspects of my life, design plays a pretty key role in my day-to-day life.
So recently we took a day where we went to this agency that's called Mintel, and what they do is they collect the packaging from around the world right into this huge database, and then you can search it, and you can see, you can like say, I want to know what's going on with closures, with, I don't know, on plastic bags, flow wraps, whatever. And so we created a day where we went down into London in order to take a tour of the facility and understand how to make sure we're searching in the most smart, efficient ways. But I went down with my packaging, my design team, but we also invited the research and engineering team to come with us, because if we can dream it up, we need to know how to make it, and we need everyone to have the same motivation. And then when we wrapped up there, we went to this restaurant, which is actually run by people who have lost their vision. So in this restaurant, and no one is cited, you order your menu ahead of time, so you might say, I want a meat menu or a surprise menu or a fish menu. And you go in and it is complete darkness. I mean, you can't see anything, and they bring you to the table, and then you experience a meal together, but you're denied one of your senses. And this allowed us, one, is we had some really good conversations. We went around the table and talked about what we appreciated and what everyone brought to the team. But we also got to see what it's like if you're missing maybe some expertise from your team, right? So, or if you're not leveraging all the senses when you create a new innovation, because when you couldn't see it, you weren't sure if you're eating
you know, was that a carrot or was that a potato? You weren't sure. So we learned how important color cues were, how important it was to see where it was on the plate. So we learned how that really created the full experience. And then we went away, and now we have this shared experience that we could go back to the office, and everyone wanted to know, what was it like at the restaurant you wore? You know, what was it like? What did you experience? You know, what do you think you ate? And that really built the team, and a shared experience and a new experience that no one ever had before.
I spend a lot of time looking at food blogs and thumbing through cookbooks. And I'm really into food, and it just so happens that our industry is also revolves around food, so that's a pretty nice marriage. And I'm always finding things in a cookbook that helps me think through like how to design a package. So without actually looking at other packaging design to lead my way.
Because there's nothing like actually being somewhere and experiences the tastes, the smells, the heat of Asia, the heat of India, the cultural of the Middle East, how different France is to Spain, and just getting a flavour for the differences around the world, because with the design team based here you get a very American perspective on things, so you're outward looking, and it's nice to have a global view. And I've lived in Asia, Europe, Africa, America. I've worked in Asia as well, so I have that experience that I can share with them and guide them when it comes to designing product for different markets, but it's nothing like being there yourself. Because I once used a bee as a graphic when we had an inspiration meeting, and that was what it was all about, cross-pollination. So you have people with different backgrounds, different interests, from different areas of design, and you throw them all in a room and you say, right, here's a problem, let's try and solve it.
I definitely have gained some insight onto our consumer by becoming a mom. I think a lot of our consumers are moms who, don't have a lot of time, have to look at things quickly, but also have a lot of concern about, what they put in their home and how they use it, and, is it kid friendly? Is it safe around my pets? Is it safe around my children? And I think that's really helped me gain some perspective and appreciation for, even further appreciation for what Method does and what we stand for.
I love breaking down the walls in those silos, and I think you always learn something, and it always is something you can apply to what you're doing and makes you smarter. And that, I think it goes back to the thing we were just talking about, which is I think if everybody had a little bit of cross-curricular knowledge with all the departments that you work with and that impact your work, you're going to be smarter, you're going to be more compassionate, and you're going to be more understanding about, the troubles that they're going through as well.
Yeah, I'll just add that we're extremely collaborative, and since we're still a pretty small company, we have very open conversations. So if I have a question, I'll just run down to DEENA and talk to her. We don't do a lot of email conversations. It's very much like be there in person, ask the questions directly. It allows for a lot more collaboration and just efficiency, because you get your answers quickly, you can work and collaborate together on demand. Like we said, we work in cubicles, and so we pushed our boundaries a little bit a few years ago, probably 5 years ago, and asked to rearrange our cubes, to open it up. So instead of having 4 cubes that have walls between them, we rearranged them so that it's a big open space. And we took that space and we added lamps and tapestries and
removed light fixtures,
removed fluorescent light bulbs, and really tried to cozy it up a little bit and open it up so that we can easily roll over to Andy's desk and see what he's working on and give him some feedback, and vice versa.
I sit right next to the head of R&E, and we are like partners, and we take and that's why we sit together on the leadership team, and we talk about how are we going to solve this problem for, in this example, Italy, who wants to grow their market share. So we look at what are you going to be doing with the product. Hey, that gives me an idea. I can focus it, give it a big window. Oh, if the product's improving, I'll put a big window on the package. So we sort of bounce ideas back and forth based on what they're able to do with the product, and then how I can showcase that in the packaging.
I think conceptually a lot of inspiration can come from where the liquid was sourced from as well, because our liquids tend to have these really great stories about where they're from. Like our Lafroig Scotch whiskey. It's from an island in Scotland called Islay, and it gets pounded by the ocean and the salt and the sea, and it just has a really great story about it. So that can give you inspiration for like how that product should look. Like that product shouldn't be showy and like luxury looking, even though it's expensive. It should look very like, yeah, maybe a little rugged, but definitely simple and down to earth, because that's where it comes from. Same with Jim Beam. Like Jim Beam comes from Kentucky. You want to get a little bit of that culture in there whenever you can, and we do that with our Irish whiskeys too. It's a little harder with things like vodka, like that's kind of a different animal, but like with the brands that have heritage, we really try to take inspiration from the heritage.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see how with global travel retail that being important, because it's almost like bringing them to the location. It's very much the idea of experiential packaging, because they get to experience a new place.
Yes, you're trying to have them picture being in that place where it came from. And that, like, makes them happy because it makes them think about a place that they're not necessarily in, but also really makes them think about the authenticity of the product and that it does have a history behind it, or it does have, you know, a strong positioning behind it. It's not just made in some factory, you know, like it's there's more care that goes into it than that. And that's what we really want to get across, as well as that handcrafted nature of what goes into making spirits.
And I think you can be too literal with research. If you sit and ask consumers in a room, what do you think of this, or what do you want? They can't come up with it, because that's not the world they live in. All designers live in the future, and they're all working in this subtle undercurrent of all the other designers around the world, looking at the same trend research and the same technologies and the same cultural shifts, and they're designing products for some future that regular consumers don't understand yet. It's a completely different world to them. It's something out in the future that they can't imagine.
I've been, this is not going to be a surprise because I've mentioned this brand a lot, it's my favorite brand, but Lafroig cocktails, so people have started to make cocktails out of Lafroig, which is unheard of because it's a really peaty, smoky, intense whiskey. So
it's like
normally,
eating an ashtray that's
people
had
have
Band-Aids in it.
People have normally just drank it neat. But there are mixologists now, especially in Chicago, but all over the country, who are starting to find ways to create cocktails of them, and they're amazing. So that's been my biggest passion, is finding bartenders who are willing to make those.
Oh, wonderful.
Some are, it just depends.
My favorite cocktail would be any whiskey, Scotch, bourbon, Canadian, neat.